John Plumtree, folks, he's heading back to Durban for next year's URC season. He's going to back to the club that he left 10 years ago to be the head coach of the Sharks. He is going to be under Neil Powell, who's going to kind of resume duties as just director of rugby. And hopefully for the Sharks, it is a chance to get some stability into the club. Hopefully, John Plumtree can stick around for a couple of years at least. And I don't know, it seems like it's been a bit messy. They could use a bit of stability, and we'll see if that's what's going to take place. We'll quickly have a look at John Plumtree's record, both with the Sharks and the Canes, where he's been head coach. He was also head coach of Wellington in the NPC many a year ago, and some of his roles as assistant as well. And you guys can let us know your thoughts on how well or not you think John is likely to go on his return to Durban, which did kind of feel like it might happen one of these days. The way it kind of came to an end 10 years ago didn't really feel that right. So, yeah, this has got a little bit of a redemption story about it anyway. But obviously, John Plumtree had a 60% winning record with Wellington in the NPC. Missed out on a Super Rugby job in New Zealand, but ended up getting one in South Africa. Now, I didn't follow his kind of Curry Cup coaching career with the Sharks at all, but I do know he won a couple of Curry Cups. He took over the Curry Cup side first, I think in 2018, before taking on the Sharks. 2008, Jesus, is that longer than that, Mark? Before taking over the Sharks proper in 2009. Now, looking back at his Sharks record in Super Rugby, I honestly felt like I thought it was better than it was. Like, of those years, 2009 to 2013, he only makes the knockout stages twice, and both times they kind of scrape through in like that last qualifying spot. So in my mind, like, you know, with the gap of time and memories getting foggy and whatnot, I had felt like their record was a bit better. But then it occurs to me as well that Super Rugby was a lot more competitive back in those days, and like qualifying for the playoffs was a lot harder than it is these days. So every year, barring that last year where he got the sack, they had a winning record. 2009, 8-5, that's a 6, but that's a non-playoff position. Back in those days, 6 did not get you in the playoffs. It was a tough ask. 2010, 7-6, 9th, only one win fewer, and they dropped 3 spots in the log. So like I mentioned, it was a lot more kind of compact. 2011, they do make the playoffs with a 10-win, 5-loss, and a draw record. They lose in an away quarterfinal to the eventual champion. Were they eventual champions? The Crusaders. 2012, that's as good as they get. They make the final. Again from 6th spot with a 10-6 record. And I did feel for that Sharks side because that was a bloody good Sharks side. But their route to the final involved an unbelievable amount of travel. They had an away game to the Reds for their quarterfinal. So they fly to Australia. Then they fly back to South Africa to play the Stormers in the semi-final. Then they have to fly all the way to New Zealand to play the Chiefs in the final. And they looked like a jet-lag team in that final. Like, they played so well up until that point, but how many times could you realistically kind of go through that process and not have it affect you? So, yeah, maybe that final is kind of what lives on in memory of John Plumtree's time with the Sharks. The following year, they go 8-8, and he gets kind of early termination from John Smith, which didn't feel that right at the time. I remember thinking it was a little bit unfair, but like I said, because I vaguely remember the Sharks having tons of injuries and a bit of drama, but I mean, I guess that's been the case with the Sharks this year as well, with the kind of off-field drama. But yeah, it was a decent record. He certainly played some attacking rugby with his time with the Sharks, and as I said, positive record in pretty much all seasons. He then leaves the Sharks and goes on to do, I think it was Ireland. He was like assistant coach, and then he goes to be assistant coach with the Hurricanes, Chris Boyd. They had a really good time at the Hurricanes, man. There was a good side under Chris Boyd and John Plumtree. When Chris Boyd leaves, John Plumtree takes over the Hurricanes for 1 year in 2019, so that kind of pre-COVID Super Rugby campaign. They finished with a 12-3-1 record, which is 4th on the log, but 2nd on points. So remember, they had the conference system that year, so they were the 2nd best team in terms of their winning record, but they finished 4th, which means they were the top kind of non-conference winning qualifier, if that makes any sense. So yeah, 2nd best team essentially. They lose the semi-final to the eventual champion Crusaders. You might wonder why did he only stay 1 year with the Hurricanes after, sitting as assistant for such a long time. Well, he went to join Ian Foster at the All Blacks, and remembering that assistant Hansen took over from coach Henry, and then assistant Fozzie took over from coach Hansen. Being Fozzie's assistant, I can only assume that John Plumtree thought this is the path to get the All Blacks job, I would imagine, because that's the path that the previous guys had followed. Sadly for him, the time with the All Blacks didn't go all that well, and some would argue Fozzie was kind of kept in the job, and but John Plumtree and the other assistants were kind of made scapegoats for a kind of less than phenomenal record. Either way, he gets the sack from the All Blacks assistant job, and he's been since trying to keep himself busy. Apparently, they've made this Sharks deal a wee way in advance, but they weren't able to announce it due to contractual obligations with that All Blacks termination. So, yes, he's certainly been keeping himself busy. But, yeah, he's back in Durban. John Plumtree. How do you guys think he's going to go? I know they've got a pretty star-studded squad in Durban right now. They seem to be a squad with a fair bit of cash on hand. I don't know how many players, though, will be leaving after this Rugby World Cup campaign. I would imagine there will be a few of the current crop who have already kind of signed contracts or are looking to do so potentially after the World Cup. But anyway, John Plumtree's back. He's got a chance to kind of make amends for, as I said, what was a little bit of a sad way to go 10 years ago. But yeah, you guys have any thoughts? How well do you reckon John is going to go? And he's a coach who very rarely finishes with a negative record, so we'll see what he can do. You guys take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.